it's kind of become stale.
Yeah.
Whereas every single year there is some disclosure that's about to take place. We kind of, and this is just to me. I'm just, at this point, I really just don't care anymore. It's you know what I mean?
You, you,
Caleb, welcome back. Great to have you again, as always.
yeah. Thanks for having me back on.
Yeah, of course.
Always enjoy it. Always a good time.
Yeah, you're pretty much a regular at this stage.
Right?
Listen, okay, so today we're just gonna look back at the show and what have been your top moments from a researching perspective. Some of the things that you guys have experienced on the show in terms of the experiments which you've done, some of the weird and strange stuff which has happened, and etc. Yeah. So
Oh,
can you take us through some of those?
yeah. So, I guess as I was thinking about this, um, over the last couple of years, there's so many things that I guess it's kind of hard to really nail down
Yeah.
if I was really going to itemize them out because a lot of them are very, um, it's so interconnected. We've been out there longer and we've improved technology. We've improved like different methods, if you will, or did a little bit more follow up. Overall, it's like it's still going, right? And we just keep getting better stuff or better results. And that's where it's like, yeah, right now with season 5 that's going to come out here in the next couple months,
Yeah.
there's going to be stuff in that could take it's just going to show that more fully. And so it's like, and that's where it's kind of, I can't talk about that stuff
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
in real great depth yet, which is, it's frustrating. So maybe I'd start with like season 2, where we really start delving into and we're starting to get really interesting stuff, I would say, through technology. And one of the first ones is the Rabbi Experiment. And that's the one that I think when it comes to season 2, we mostly go back to or make most reference to at the Rabbi Experiment because I think because it was the first real hard we did A and B and C happened, right? With the rabbi coming out doing his chant, we had the FLIR cameras, we had the goal of, is there something going on, and if it's interdimensional or something, how maybe could we see it? And initially the FLIR was not actually going to be there, and Eric just had that thought. It was sitting right there, and he's like, I'm going to take that out with me too and pipe that through.
Hmm.
And come to find out, that was like ended up being one of the things that we caught some of the first really interesting things on camera that way,
Yeah.
just by a whim that Eric had. And then, you know, thinking about it too, season 2 is where we had Pete Kelsey come out for the first time, and that's where we see again with the use of his lidar systems and photogrammetry stuff. We start catching really interesting things in those scans that shouldn't be happening according to Pete. And what's cool with Pete is he has so many good friends in the same industry, and he sends his results to those guys as well. And he's like, "Have you ever seen anything like this?" And he goes back to the manufacturer of the device every time he gets these anomalous stuff that he's seeing out here, and every time they're like, "What are you doing, Pete? Where are you going with this?"
Hmm.
And so, I'd say that's top 10 there pretty easily because I feel so much of the investigation, at this point, we can point back to those two instances as being some of the very real cool first hard evidence, I would say.
Hmm.
Um, and then, kind of think about season 3 and in there, and that's where it's like, so much of the intermittent stuff. So like, um, Pete comes through and he starts doing more scans. Um, in between filming seasons, and he keeps having stuff happen. So a lot of people don't know this, and if they haven't, been a part of like the insider web page and into some of the different events that we've done, where we actually talk about this a little bit more, is Pete's lost multiple drones on the ranch, and he always brings, like, he had this Matrice, and it was like the top of the line drone. I want to say it was like multiples of thousands of dollars. I want to say one of them was like a $30,000 or $40,000 drone, and it was touted as uncrashable, and it crashes on the ranch for no reason.
The interesting thing with that is it's quite, some of these equipment manufacturers, they kind of come onto the show, and it's obviously great exposure for them, but
Yes.
when those things kind of go faulty, it's not exactly what they would want to happen.
No, and that's a great point, and we've actually talked about that in some of our live streams and things. Is when you look at what these uh, leaders in their field are looking at, they're going, well, yeah, I'll come on a TV show and show off my stuff, and it's great advertising. It's show, and it brings them more business and all that stuff. And every single time that I don't know how much I actually show this that I'm thinking about, but like we always, whenever we bring these third party experts on, we always run through like the same, I guess, checklist with them, if you will. We give them the medical, and hey, watch yourselves. Like if there's anything crazy going on, please let us know. Like, don't just look past anything that's physically going on. So we always do that, and then we always warn them, hey, or we always ask them, what have you heard about with Skinwalker Ranch, and what do you know about this place? And the first couple of years, obviously, like most of them were very much more in the dark, if you will. Had very limited knowledge for the most part about the ranch or any kind of investigation that was going on. And that, obviously, now that we've been out here for, um, 5, 6+ years now, it's out there a little bit more. We're really a part of a lot of the conversations in regards to the phenomenon, if you and these different realms, if you will, like UFOs and poltergeist and or remote viewing and things like that. And so that's really cool. That the ranch is such a focal point, and because of the approach that we're trying to maintain and keep and try to work through. But yeah, and then these third party experts, they come out and they're like, yeah, most of them have like the okay, yeah, whatever, like, and then something happens, and they look at us like it's not real, like no way, like we're punking them or something, but more recently it's gotten out there a lot more, obviously, and some more of them are aware a little bit of what's going on the ranch, and a lot of them are excited because like one of our third party experts in season 5, they participated in stuff with season 4.
Okay.
And really interesting stuff happened with their equipment. They took it as that challenge, and I'm trying to be I don't want to give away too much, right? But they took it as a challenge and was like, wait, like, what can we maybe do to our system to improve it? And they bring it back for season 5. And yeah, that's, yeah, like we'll have to talk about that one in more detail, but just what happened the couple days that they were out there again with their equipment, and the level of upgrades that they did. And it's just there. It's still one of those things, like I'm still trying to wrap my brain around some of the stuff that we had happen. But
with regards to some of the stuff that's happened, and I'll ask you this, I think on every podcast episode that we've done, what do you think is going on? Because obviously, as you guys keep on doing experiments, as you keep on doing research, the general consensus has to kind of change every now and then, right?
Yeah, and that's where I think at this point, we feel a lot more comfortable in saying that we know that there's some kind of intelligence aspect to this, and whether, and that's, and the question there that remains is, okay, is this, again, is this something that is human caused, somehow, some way that we don't know, and that's the scary thought, is if that's a near peer that's able to do something like this, that's really, that's a scary thing. And then that raises more questions like, okay, why in the middle of Utah, like eastern Utah? You know, it's there, why? And then also like, okay, is if this is some kind of, say, interdimensional or spiritual side, or something that we can't see, um how do we interact with that? How do we potentially communicate with that better? And also then, okay, if it's more, say, alien, as of not on the Earth or coming from somewhere else in the solar system, or galaxy or
Mm.
universe, right? It's again, why here, um, and what's the point, kind of thing. So it's definitely something that I'd say we're all like, yes, there's some kind of intelligence, but what that intelligence is hard to say, and that's where you look back, and another one of those top experiments or experiences on the ranch that I've been a part of was the rocket where we shot it up through the triangle, and
Yeah.
in the high speed camera we see what we call the blob, or whatever you want to call it, and we break down that video, and the expert there, he's going, this is not like light reflection, this is not anything like that, and we scrutinized it we're able to scrutinize that one very heavily, and it's really hard to deny at this point, I think, where we see this rocket go up, and the engine, for whatever reason, when it hits that point, deflagrates, or explodes. um, and when you go back and look at what we've had happen in the past, that range where rockets, and we've got so many rockets that have gone through there, and you'll
Mm.
see them go up and then they veer off, or something, like something is affecting their course at that exact altitude. And then on top of that too, is Eric went through, and there's going to be some more information in regards to that one that I'm really excited for people to see. And it just cements more, if when you understand what's going on with what Eric brings forward,
Yeah.
it really just shows that there was something there, and that's where it's like, that one's really going to be cool when people see that. Um, so yeah, and that whole night on top of that rocket with the Black Hawk coming in, and we know it was a Black Hawk, and
Mm.
their flight pattern and their dwell time and stuff. It was really, that's definitely in top 10, and experience. And it kind of hit me this year, is, yeah, we talked about the experiments, but the experiments turned into an experience themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of people really paying attention to what's going on out here, especially with the show. And I know it's kind of hard for, I think, people still believe that we're not influenced by the government. We're not, we're not on their payroll. We're not on any of that stuff at this point. Um, and so everything that you're seeing on the show is literally, we film it, we don't talk about it for 8 months, and then you guys see it
Yeah.
for the first time. And a lot of us on the as the cast members and stuff in the show, we don't see the final edits until most of us don't see the final edits until they come out too. So because I know they reach out to Eric and Travis a lot in regards to the scientific side, and I will say that Prometheus is really good about contacting Eric and Travis and going, okay, is this something that makes sense how we're presenting it, and is there this scientific deliverable?
Mm.
I think they're doing a really good job of keeping that uh, in in their scope,
Yeah.
uh, and trying to, and because I know Eric and Travis, they have a little bit more involvement on the post processing side, and if the and at the end of the day, if they can give their suggestions and stuff, and then that comes back on Prometheus of if they're gonna follow that, And I would say that for the most part, they're really good at that.
Yeah, because obviously they are Eric and Travis and yourself and the rest of the crew. You guys are kind of following the whole research basis of what you guys are doing, whereas Prometheus, they're filming a TV show. So I suppose they got to get those points to kind of meet. And
yep, and that's
yeah,
and that's where you're trying to fit both. There's a lot of relationships there that have to work, and so yeah.
And it's probably not always easy.
No, no, it's not. But at the end of the day, I really enjoy what Prometheus has brought forth and how they've presented.
Do you feel that there are some experiments which you guys have done, which have had pretty spectacular results that you guys should probably have kind of delved more into?
Yeah. So obviously we a lot of people are always like, so many rockets, oh no, another rocket launch.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's like, and Eric, or during our what we call Phenomicon, it's like one of the things that has kind of come about in the local area. It's it's a conference, and a bunch of people come from all over the place, and we were actually doing an activity where we're shooting rockets off of people. And Travis, people asked that question, and he was like, so he laid it out really well. So rockets are cheap, and relatively they're cheap, and you can get different sizes. You can do all sorts of different payloads. And is it the most ideal? No. But do you know how much it costs for a helicopter to come out for a day and fly around and get instrumented out and stuff? It's thousands and thousands of dollars, right? And a rocket, we can build hundreds of rockets, if not thousands of rockets, for even half the cost of what one helicopter costs, right? So it's cheap. They're there's a lot of utility to them, so you can put all sorts of different instruments on them, and so it's a really viable way of seeing if there's anything up in the air. And then again, we're talking about stuff, say, above the triangle, like maybe different kinds of energies, different kinds of physical, possibly physical stuff going on there, right? So a rocket also serves as a form of kinetic energy that maybe interacts with what's going on up there. And that's where, come back to season 4 and the blob rocket. Was there some kind of reaction there, or was it some kind of outside force that we weren't able to pick up on that affected that rocket? We don't know, but it certainly brings a good question, and so definitely rockets are one of those ones that we always seem to come back to, again, because they're cheap, they're very versatile in their use, and we continue to get results whenever it seems like we're using them. I would say another one is again, we come back to like the LiDAR and the different photogrammetry things that we're doing. Every year it seems that Pete's bringing out like the newest and latest to see what happens, and we continue to get results with those. So that comes back, and we're also going, okay, what can we change with some of these experiments, or what can we do? Again, obviously we have to continue to try to replicate as much as we can, but then it's also like so many of these things that happen, I don't know how you replicate them. So and I think a good example of this is when you go back again to, say, season 3, and another really crazy night was with our telescope experiment that we did, and some of the stuff that happened there that you don't see in the show, and like one of the more spooky things is at the end of the night where we had go back a little bit. This goes back to also the experiment where we had the airplane that was push brooming across the ranch, and you see all that GPS data,
Yeah.
that says it's like 62 miles underneath the earth, right?
Yeah.
And then in that episode, you start seeing our equipment, like with uh Travis and Tom and Bryant inside the command center, where their audio is like repeating back to them through different microphones and stuff, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so what you didn't see in the next episode with the telescopes is that happened again on the helipad where they had all the telescopes and stuff.
Mm.
But when that happened, it was at the end of the experiment, and it was kind of the done we were done with filming, and it started happening. So there was no, and the guys were like, shut everything off. And so obviously we had to trust that the production guys shut all the cameras off, that they shut all the anything that electrical off.
Yeah.
And it was happening, and the guys were walking out into the middle of the field still, and we were still picking them up through stuff. And it was just like one of those things where we were like, really, it like destroyed any idea that we have any kind of privacy on the ranch, that we're always maybe being listened to. It doesn't matter. Like there's something always listening and picking up our conversations, and there's nothing we can do about it.
Regardless of technology being on or off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As crazy as that sounds. So, and that's where it's like, how do you do that? You know, and so, and to give you an idea, like that's where one of the conversations was, is we know that the Russian embassy and the American embassy in Russia, through for years and years, they knew there was some kind of device in the embassy that was picking up private conversations between a bunch of the American diplomats and stuff. And they were going, how do the Russians know what we're saying?
Mm.
And come to find out, they figured out that when they built the building, they put these metal plates inside the wall. And because they figured out you hit that plate with a certain frequency and you can listen to everything.
Yeah.
And, you know, and you know, so what's going on out there? And that's where, you know, I can tell you, Tom and Eric have torn apart those command centers,
Mm.
and with the upgrades and stuff that they've done, and they've gotten in between the walls, and there's nothing there. You know, we've looked for listening devices, we've looked for all sorts of stuff, but we've never found anything like that, to my knowledge.
Yeah, so there's obviously nothing which can kind of I suppose deflect the frequency so that you can be able to hear what conversations are having. That's
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So it's like there's been conversations like that, and we're going, okay, what the heck's going on? That's why we still have those thoughts like, what's going on? And there's things that are disconcerting like that.
With regards to the livestock on at Skinwalker or on Skinwalker Ranch, has anything else happened? Have there been any more cattle mutilations or any, you know, livestock just dying or anything like that?
So I have to say, like, you'll have to wait and see. Because I'll say he's right. um, so I could probably tell you this. In regards to on the property itself, there's something that you're going to see if they play it, if they really show what some of the surrounding circumstances again, and really give you guys a good idea. And it's something that's pretty terrifying.
Okay.
And yeah, you'll know what it is when you see it. If you think about this conversation in regards to livestock, you'll definitely go, oh crap.
We'll talk about it next year.
And we'll talk about it next year.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right. I know it's so annoying. But we actually shared some really cool stuff on our live stream too, actually 2 days ago, along this very line of questioning with some of our insiders. So anybody who's watching this, go be an insider. You too, Van.
I'll drop the link in the description as always.
Yeah. And so what happened too is, so I shared the story with the group, and it's one that I'm still do be careful about some of the information, just because of who my friend is, and he works for another department out here in law enforcement. And I don't know if I've ever told you this story or not, but this was one that's kind of one of the things that I've noticed is when I was out patrolling as an officer, um, things would happen to other officers, and they would experience things, and then they would call me. And what was cool is I was listening to their radio traffic during their calls, and I could tell. I was like, okay, that's a little different. Like something else is going on, right?
Yeah.
But my initial thought wasn't, oh, it's the ranch related kind of stuff. I was like, okay, what the heck's going on?
Mm.
But this particular night, I remember where I was up in the north, an area north of where I'm at right now in the basin doing my deputy stuff. And
Yeah.
my one friend, he was stopping cars and just doing normal traffic stuff, um, and there was like an hour period there where he kind of stopped, and which was kind of not, I wouldn't say it's unusual, but when he's busy and he keeps himself busy, um, he calls me and he goes, dude, like you're never gonna guess what just happened from your radar. He essentially tells me that he's parked in this area, and I know the area really well. And you can see both in front of you and behind you for a couple good miles. You can see when the car's coming or any kind of traffic. Um, and he's sitting there. It's late at night. Well, 10:30, 11 o'clock, or 10 to 11 o'clock is when this happened. And he essentially picks up an object in his radar that's going like 140 miles an hour. And he's like, what? And it increases speed as it gets closer to him. And he knows it's getting closer to him because, again, he's got two radars, one in the back of his vehicle and the one in the front, and he's picking up so he can pick up on both sides. And he knows he was getting something because these radar systems, when they pick up an object, you get an audible tone.
Okay.
And you can tell if it's getting closer or if it's getting further away from you by the pitch of it.
Mm.
So as it's getting closer to you, it gets more intense because it's getting more of that return.
All right.
And then when it's going away from you, it
Yeah.
goes a lot quiet, right? And it's a constant tone. It's not a beep 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 beep. It's
Okay.
like a wee
Okay.
kind of tone. And so he's picking this up, and it basically goes over him. His rear radar drops it off, and his front radar picks it up as it's going away from him.
Okay.
And it's going anywhere from 140 to 200 miles an hour. As and it basically sits there and flies over him multiple times. And at one point, he's picking it up on his front radar as it's going away from him, and a vehicle, he sees the lights in the coming up on him, and the radar picks it up, and so he's picking up both signatures, and the other one stops, and the car goes by him, it does what it's supposed to, and then he's sitting there like, okay, that was weird, and it starts back up after the car's gone. And so, and this is where it gets really interesting. Why I tell you that story, and there's a couple more things I'll have to probably go into at a later time in regards to that.
Yeah.
That make it even more crazy. But we went through and looked on the map, and literally where he sits or was sitting when this happened, and it's happened multiple times over the years now. We've got a couple recordings of it now at this point.
Okay.
If you draw a straight line from where he sits, there's this corridor that within like the mesa or the topography out here, it's like this little corridor where you draw that straight line and it goes straight through the triangle at the ranch, continues through, and it actually goes through the same spot in the east field where the photogrammetry anomaly is from Pete Kelsey.
Okay.
And we just noticed this 2 days ago. Tom drew the line out even further, and there's been a spot on the highway where Eric has had the Jeep break down on him multiple times, and it's all in a straight line.
Wow.
And then the other part of that, coming back to the livestock thing, is in that same corridor, it's gotten back to us that this last year there were some areas not on the ranch and some local families that were basically being terrorized by something, and cattle mutilations were happening, like the crazy, what you would think of cattle mutilation type stuff, like horses and cows torn apart and weird stuff. And I don't know if there was any police reports filed, but basically, and it's been confirmed through a couple different sources that have reached out to Tom, is that one family actually just moved away because they were like, we can't keep dealing with this anymore. Basically, they got ran out of their house by whatever it was.
Inside the house.
I don't know if it was inside the house, but the family basically moved away because they just were like, they were terrified.
Yeah.
And that was something that we're like, we got to go, we're trying to do some follow up on that. And, but that's essentially like as much as I can talk about it at this point.
And
but
how far away is that from the ranch itself?
within a couple miles.
Okay. All
So,
right.
and that's the thing is like, there's that corridor where we can draw the straight line and you
Yeah.
can see where all those things are happening. So the stuff on the ranch, my friend and his radar picking stuff up, and apparently this area where these families were being like terrorized essentially. And so it's just one of those things that's really interesting.
And what would you say is, well, what's the end game with this, with all of this? The research that you guys are doing, how long is it gonna go on for? Because I mean, you guys are doing this, you guys started doing this regardless of the TV show. So
Yeah.
if the TV show doesn't get renewed, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the end of the research.
No, I think it'll continue. As far as I know, Brandon has um, said that he's going to hold on to the ranch for as long as possible and continue to try and do research and
Yeah.
continue to try and get answers, if you will.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing is, are we asking the right answers? Are we on the right track of, what are we looking for kind of thing? And so I don't see it stopping anytime soon, especially now. Say, even if the ranch at some point transfers ownership again at some point, I have a hard time believing that it's just going to stop. Like, especially at this point, with all the attention that's been drawn to it, and all the and the evidence that we've got over the last couple of years, and really, Eric's actually gone through the last, he's going through this. Terabytes of information that we've collected for over the last 6-7 years, and he's actually going through and itemizing everything out, all the videos, all the recordings that we have, and with dates and everything, so we can, and because we know that there's a bigger picture here potentially, and we've already kind of gone back and we've already discovered stuff that we're like, oh man, like we had no idea that those instances were within like the same period of time. So like different things that happened, and at the time we didn't really put two and two together, right? And now looking back, we're like, oh man, like this happened on this day, this happened on the next day, and then this happened the day after that, and kind of figured that out because he's gone through and itemized all this stuff out. And now we're going back through that record, and so it's really cool going back and seeing.
Well, I suppose in doing that, he can kind of see if any patterns come up or anything, yeah, essentially. Has Bigelow ever reached out again to Brandon?
Nope. In fact, he said he will never come back. He doesn't even want to talk about the place, from my understanding. Eric was in the room when he heard him say this, and I believe, and other, I want to say a couple other individuals on the team early on when there were some meetings there. And from my understanding, Bigelow wants nothing to do with the ranch anymore and will never come back, wants no connection to it anymore at all. And I've heard different stories. I've heard different reasons why. And so I don't know without personally knowing him and talking to him myself. I don't know. And Jay Stratton and some and the other guys on the team that have had interactions with him and stuff have all said he's, from my understanding, a decent guy, I guess, and has that general curiosity of stuff, and that's kind of what drew him here at first. But so I don't know, but I can tell you he wants nothing to do with it.
Yeah, because he owned Mount Wilson Ranch before Skinwalker Ranch. And obviously I've had Carl Vibe on the podcast a few times as well, and he's knee deep into his research and stuff at Mount Wilson Ranch. And have you guys seen any kind of, I don't know, similar things happening?
That's kind of one of those questions that we've been asked, and I think there are similarities in a lot of different areas, and that's where it'd be neat to go and actually do some of these other experiments and see for ourselves.
Mm.
And that's where, I've gone out into the area now in the basin itself, and with some of my uh, friends and things, and some other acquaintances. And, we've gone out with Carl Vibe up here into the mountains, and James Keenan and
Yeah.
some other individuals. And, James Keenan, that guy's a wealth of knowledge when it comes to the Aztecs and a lot of the Western stories that, and the history that's out here. So I really enjoy talking to him. And that's the thing is like yes, the ranch is a focal point, and I think a really, and we are leading a lot of um, research and stuff, and really trying to peel back what's going on, but there are so many places across the world that I think are connected somehow. And
Yeah.
and that's what's crazy is I think there's so much out there that it's like I don't know if we'll ever really be able to put our finger on it.
Well, just our oceans in general. I mean, how
Oh
much?
yeah,
I mean, we haven't explored. I think the figure was put out. I think it's like 5 or 7% that we've explored of our oceans.
yeah,
Meaning that we've got like 90 odd % where we don't have a clue what's going on.
right. And like the whole megalodon question, or
Yes.
there's what kind of animals or creatures are so far down in the ocean that we have no idea. And I could tell you I've heard the stories or the reports and seen some of the photos that I don't know if who knows if they're real or not, kind of thing. And but submarines going missing, or World War II ships
Yeah.
having interactions with some kind of monster that was big, or something. It's not hard to jump to the Operation High Jump, I think, with the one expedition of the Navy that went down to Antarctica, and
Mm.
Admiral Byrd and all that in the 50s, and the reports that were supposedly came from that, and just who knows at this point. And that's where it's like me, I've seen enough stuff that I'm like I don't discount a whole lot. I'd say I'm pretty open-minded about hearing things and seeing things, just because I've had those experiences myself and what we've seen on the ranch.
Yeah. I was thinking about this the other day with regards to our oceans. And I don't think we have technology. Yeah, I could be wrong, but I read somewhere we don't have technology that can go down that deep, um,
Yeah,
into the depths of like the deepest point of the ocean, or to large parts of it, or something like that. And that in itself is fascinating. You talk about all these like the megalodon and all these other creatures which could be down there. I mean, there could be. Who knows what's down there? We could
yeah,
be the aliens to them, so to
yeah,
speak.
exactly.
You know what I mean? So it's kind of like a
Yeah,
whole world flipped.
yeah.
And
Oh,
that's when you really go down the rabbit hole, which
oh yeah,
I mean, which this whole topic essentially is, because it's all a lot of it is speculation. Um, and with regards to portals and stuff, do you guys draw any comparisons with regards to some of the reports, for argument's sake, the Bermuda Triangle, for planes
yeah,
going and stuff like that?
yeah. I know there's been some comparison, or is there maybe some kind of connection? Um, And I think at this point it's like I don't think we have any data that suggests that they are. Um, and and then you get on the conjecture side and you go, okay, well, like maybe what, who knows? But officially, I think that's where it's like we don't have any kind of data that would point to that
Mm.
when it comes to the ranch itself. Um, but and I will say this is what there's one of the things that happened with season five, and one of the third party experts that we brought in, and the way he lined out what we found and what he showed and the evidence to it, it's literally gonna. I still don't know how you explain this.
Okay.
Um, and and yeah, and that kind of comes back to like um the world ocean stuff, like what I'm thinking about, like what you were just saying. And I want to say there was some kind of prehistoric fish or something that was actually found over by like Australia, I want to say a couple of years ago, and everybody thought that fish was dead for millions of years or something.
Okay.
And yet they find a living one swimming around, Either people just don't recognize it for what it is, or it's so vast that we're missing stuff, and yeah,
That it is, I mean, it is so big. What's out there, what is unexplored essentially. And
yeah,
it's, I mean, again, it's all speculation, but it's pretty cool. And I'd say it's pretty more than likely that there's a lot of stuff that we just don't know about.
yeah.
Well, there is. Uh, with regards to the oceans.
Oh yeah, with the oceans, and then I would even say in areas where large land areas, like look at Canada. There's thousands and thousands of square miles out there where there's nobody for you. Maybe you had some mountain man walking through there 100 years ago or 200 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many reports of I think especially in British Columbia of Bigfoot
Mhm.
and the whole Sasquatch thing and
Yeah.
yeah. Um and I've had a few people on the show with regards to that. I had Dr. Jeff Meldrum on the show with regards to Bigfoot and
Mhm. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of crazy stuff with interference with signals and stuff, and GPS, the stuff that we've seen with GPS. And when you realize just how many things rely on it,
mhm.
it could get scary. When you start thinking that there's something that potentially could be knocking GPS out or interfering with it in ways, and it's either, yeah, and this is some of those questions, is that either it's something we don't understand yet, and it's a completely natural phenomena, or it's something that is coming from some source and it's being jammed or something. And then what we, season four, you guys saw some stuff in reference to time. GPS totally relies on time, and if there's something actually affecting time in ways we don't understand, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And that's what's, again, like really cool is Eric and Travis and their wealth of knowledge and understanding of some of those topics. And when they're sitting here going, there's no way to explain this, like they're literally sitting there scratching their heads, and you can see that they're going, like, Eric gets this look on his face, and he's trying to work it out, and he just, and he'll be the one that's like, I can't make any sense of that.
Have they ever kind
Basically,
of come to a conclusion where, because obviously they thinking of things from I assume from a physics standpoint. So if something doesn't make sense from that type of standpoint or from a scientific standpoint, then it's kind of where they're at, where there's just nowhere to explain it.
yeah, they're going, okay, what is going on here? And that's where they're trying to ask those right questions and trying to, what math can help explain that, kind of thing,
Yeah.
or something like that. And that's where it kind of, I don't know. Yeah, and that's where it's like, yeah, when season five comes out, literally we had, usually like every year, I think we've had one, sometimes two, like really cool big
Mm.
things that were like, okay, that was awesome. Oh,
Yeah.
and maybe that one thing that really makes us like scratch our heads and really, and this last year it's like four or five things, just huge things that by themselves are, I think, literally something that's world changing.
Mm.
And people, when they really see what happened and see what we caught, it's yeah, it's going to be crazy. And yeah, we're still, as a team, like, we still in our private conversations right now, we're still just like, how do you explain that?
And you guys are obviously under contract with Prometheus not to say anything until everything airs, right?
Yeah, and that's where we're, and there's some stuff where we have questions. So like, um, once they air it, we can talk about it, kind of thing, because essentially they have right of first viewership, or right to present it first. Um, and that's where we have questions. Sometimes we're like, okay, well, are they going to come back and revisit some stuff that they haven't ever talked about? And
Mm.
that's where sometimes we're like, can we talk about this yet? But then it's also like, well, maybe they might revisit it. But that's where we're also like, we there's some things where we're like, we're not going to sit on it for years and years wondering if they're ever going to come back and revisit something. And that's one of the hard parts too, is like, how does it tie? I'd probably say a good thing of this is one of my first experiences on the ranch, and where I saw something on top of the mesa.
Mm.
It took years for me to finally get like some really cool validation from it, and other people going, wait a minute. And then they come back and go, this reminds me of what you saw. I'm like, I know.
Mm.
So sometimes it takes years from when we experience something and we go, that was cool. Yeah. We go, yeah, that was cool. That was amazing. But we don't really understand maybe the whole, how important it was until years later.
Mm. Okay.
And so that gets hard in knowing when we can talk about some stuff. And, and I've gone through that, where it's like, I don't know if you've gone through this, where you experience something and you really question yourself, right? And
Me,
and then,
me
yeah,
personally.
yeah,
Okay.
so, or anyone who listens, if you've ever experienced something, then you really go, wait a minute, and you start questioning yourself, and then you're like, oh man, like, I don't want to sound crazy, I don't want to,
Do you know
you
what?
know.
It's interesting that you say that. And something I experienced something, and this is actually going to bring me to my next point. So the one night I'm letting the dogs in from outside, so I look out and I see these two. I suppose it's UFOs because I don't know what the hell it was, but it was silent. These two balls of light, kind of in the distance, completely silent, just going past. And I was like, okay, that's weird. Um,
Hmm.
because and the thing is, why it's like a lot of people are like, well, you wouldn't have been this calm when you saw it. But the thing is, I think people are so desensitized at this stage by UFO footage because it's pretty much everywhere. And anyone, I mean, I can fake UFO footage in a video editor in under a minute. It's very, very easy to do. And the thing is, when I say I think people are getting desensitized by a lot of these stuff, it's because it's everywhere. I would say 90% of it is bullshit, if not more.
Yeah.
And obviously, I saw something, but again, now it's kind of like, okay, well, that's interesting. Could it have been drones? Probably. And that's kind of the only, I would say, experience that I've had
Hmm.
personally. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of when you delve into this subject, like I obviously have with regards to the topics that I have on my podcast and stuff, it really is, and I've said this so many times before, it's a never-ending rabbit hole of information where a lot of the information is bullshit.
Yeah.
Um,
There's actors that are going to be putting stuff out there
yes.
because,
Oh, wow.
and yeah.
And I'm not pointing figures at Skinwalker Ranch because, again, with regards to Skinwalker Ranch, you guys were doing this before it became a show because it was well documented that Brandon Fugal didn't want to do it. The History Channel and Prometheus was chasing him for a while to I think if I got it right, just to get a meeting with him.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah. On that topic, like when it comes to the television show, like we've tried to really make this very that very point is you got like the people in the show, you're literally seeing 45 minutes
Yes.
out of, so say we film every week, Monday through Friday,
Yeah.
for minimum 12 hours, right? And we have multiples of cameras. I'm not just talking the cameraman cameras, I'm talking the GoPros, the action cameras,
Mm.
all these different cameras. And so we literally have thousands of hours of footage per week
Mm.
that they have to go through.
And compress.
Yeah. And so you guys are getting like the highlights, right? And obviously you're going to get the highlights because the highlights is where you get your top stuff, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of our things is like, and that's fine. So that gives us the opportunity when people ask us questions, just go back and go and really delve in.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes back to the previous conversation of there's times where we're still like, how much can we dive in still?
Yeah.
But there are the ones where we're like, yeah, we're going to talk about it and try and give you that more full picture.
Mm.
But I can tell you, yeah, there's stuff where you're not going to cease. We go out and there's want-wans in our own stuff, right? But they're not going to show that stuff.
Mm.
As much as some of it, I wish they would, just because then it really gives people that, oh yeah, like they go out and nothing happens.
I think with regards to some of these, again, the subject as a whole, where there's always some, especially now these days with, everything that's happening in Congress, you've got David Grush that's come out and, the whole whistleblower thing.
Yeah.
What kind of becomes, what the right word is, it's kind of become stale. Whereas every single year there is some disclosure that's about to take place where kind of, and this is just to me, I'm just, at this point I really just don't care anymore. It's
yeah, and it's like how much, oh, this is gonna be the most amazing thing, but it's like, okay,
yeah.
And a lot of people are like, I've heard this is if it was really that crazy, or if they really did get like this proof, it would be all over the news, right?
Yeah, and I mean the thing is, it's been a strange year with regards to the UFO hearings, all that stuff. There was this kid in Las Vegas who saw aliens in his backyard, and
Yep.
to me it's kind of like, well, if it turns out to be true, okay, cool.
Right.
If it doesn't, my day looks exactly the same tomorrow as what it would have if it, either way. So, but it is, so you had that. Then you had the alien bodies in Mexico, which was yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there's a lot of, and then why this is such a never-ending rabbit hole. Now there's people saying that, well, this is some sort of psyop to kind of distract people from what's really going on, and it all becomes like too much. It's
right. Yeah, like on that topic, it's really interesting because my wife actually sent me this clip, and it's Tucker Carlson.
Oh yes, yeah.
You probably know the one I'm talking about, where he's talking about how there's potential. What if the government's in league with whoever this is, right?
Mm.
And the way he's talking about some of the stuff, like he's seen some stuff, but he says enough where I think he's talked to people or he's seen some stuff, and even and that's where I'm like, I totally get it, like the whole psyop thing, or just look at what's going on, like how can you trust what's going on, but it is just really interesting when you see this from coming from Tucker Carlson talking about some of the stuff the way he's talking about it.
The phenomenon is real. It's been recorded for thousands of years. We know that. There's something buzzing around us in the skies, but also under the oceans, we now know, and probably underground as well. So it's real. The government's lied about it a million different ways, probably for a million different reasons, for at least 80 years. That's also confirmed. They're lying about it now. Who knows what their motives are?
But I mean, this information has been around since Roswell. I think Stanton Friedman kind of was speaking about that back in the day.
Oh yeah, and it's and obviously we face this with the show. We face this with the ranch all the time. Like
again, I'm not pointing fingers at
I know. It's I can relate to it, you know, because and I think that's where like Eric and Travis and the team and you know all of us are like we just want to present it as honestly as we can, right?
Mm.
And try to and build that rapport with people in that sense, and that's where we're like, yes, yeah, we've had crazy stuff happen, and I know when it comes to like a television show, people are like, oh, they're just making it or whatever, right?
That's always going to be built in. That's
always.
So
yeah, so I can very much relate to that, right?
Yeah.
And recently I was covering some night shifts on the law enforcement side, and you know, and it's one of those things that always comes up. And it's funny because one of the things I've noticed is like the people who are like, oh, it's all BS, they're the ones that ask me about it first.
Yeah.
Right. Like if I'm still involved with it, if it's still going, and then they're like, oh, it's all a bunch of right. But they're the ones that bring it up. I'm not the one that's like, hey, you want to talk about it? You know, they're the ones that have to tell me they think it's nonsense. And that's where I'm like, it's fine because I'm like, I've seen more than enough. I'm out there. I've seen this real time, and then our camera guys. You know, this is where it's really the part that bugs us is like our camera guys and the production company and the way they view the fourth wall drives us nuts. You know, and everybody knows there's camera guys out there, and we have all these people out there, and yet they won't show some of that stuff. Because they don't want to break the fourth wall thing, which I get. That's their decision, but it's one of those things, you know. And coming back to this, it's just funny to me. The people who think it's BS, I think at the very root of it, for many of them, is if they accept that some of the stuff is really going on, it completely shatters their viewpoint of the world, and it makes them extremely uncomfortable.
Well, that's the thing. I don't think there's going to be a television show or any one person that is going to be able to convince, you know, everyone that all stuff is real, that UFOs exist, that ghosts, you know, whatever, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, whatever paranormal activity there is. It's always going to be met with skepticism, and it generally, I agree with you. It's something to do with how they view the world, so to speak. Which is kind of strange from my perspective. And I'm saying it's strange from my perspective. I'm not saying it's wrong. But to me, if all of this turns out to be bullshit, again, my day is going to look exactly the same tomorrow.
It's one of those things like, you know, almost like one of those things like, don't get worked up about all the stuff you hear in the news. Don't get worked up about stuff, you know, because it's like, really, what's going on with you, where you're at right now? How is this really affecting you, right? And so it's like, it's cool being a part of stuff like this. Don't get me wrong. And you know, but then it's like, for whatever reason, somehow I'm a part of it.
Yeah.
You know, it has become kind of that normal part of my life. Like there's things where stuff happens and all of us are like, happened again.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's because and it's kind of like when you get your new toy, you know, you're excited and you play with it for 20 minutes and then you're like, oh, next thing.
Well, exactly. And when you ask me about, you know, have I had any experience as well, you know, I still saw, you know, I saw what I saw with regards to those 2 or 3 orbs flying around or whatever it was. And that's kind of where I am with it. Was it, you know, was it a spaceship? I don't know. Does it make a difference? At this stage, it really doesn't make a difference to me because that's right. Kind of like,
you know, one of the, you know, on that exact thing, it's like we always get, people are always sending us stuff. People are always wanting to talk to us about stuff, right? And you know, and this is where it's like, I don't discount what they saw, you know, again, or how they're explaining it, things like that. But it's like, at the end of the day, there's a lot of videos out there with lights
Yes.
showing a ball of light, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, like that's all it is at that point. Like, you know, again, come back. One of the craziest things that we've caught on camera, with the orb coming into and out of the mesa.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, that's still a ball of light, like on camera,
Yeah.
right? Like I get that. But when you look at everything in the surrounding picture and stuff, that's where it's like, okay, like this is crazy because, you know, like us, we have stories of people watching things go in and out of the mesa for going back generations.
Yeah.
You know, um, we have this is kind of one of the interesting things too. Is like, so for me, Travis and I saw something 20 feet from us, and it looked cloaked. It had all this, you know. There's that story's crazy.
Mm.
Well, again, coming back to my point, sometimes it takes years for stuff to come that makes you go, what, you know, get some of that validation. 2 years ago, we had some Bigfoot people come down to Phenomenon, and they had to talk to Eric. Like that was their whole goal. And they showed Eric this video. We have it. And when you hear the story, it gets really interesting because they're obviously they're Bigfoot people, right? They're out in the woods. They're looking for big hairy monster, right? Well, apparently all four of these people, I think it was four, maybe five, maybe three, somewhere in there, right?
Yeah.
But they all heard like this crashing through the trees, and they all look over and they see a dark, big thing running through the trees. One of them has the camera. They pan over and they're like, "We got it." They go back to watch it, and in the video, it's not a big hairy thing. It's a cloaked. It appears cloaked.
Okay.
But every single one of them will tell you that they saw a big hairy thing running through the trees. And we have the video of it where you see whatever this is going through the trees, and it looks cloaked, like a cloaked figure, like freaking Predator.
Okay. Like in a stealth mode type.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when Eric saw that, he was like, I have to show this to Eric, or I have to show this to Travis and Caleb. Because he thought about what we saw out there on the ranch a couple years ago. No, yeah, and so my point is this is actually something I guess that's very, very common in the Bigfoot thing is people's think they see a big hairy thing, they go back and it's not. And then also like people seeing this big hairy thing running through the trees, like there's a lot of stories of where it's running through the trees and someone sees it and then it basically becomes a ball of light and disappears.
Hmm.
And so like one of the conversations we had is this something that is like messing with people's minds somehow? And it's like going down into those deep ancestral memories that we might have from 10,000 years ago when we're dealing with short-faced bears that are like 15 feet tall, you know? And is that something that's like so deep ingrained into our psyche that like you see that and you instantly just feel fear? You just feel like these emotions of like, oh crap, I got to get out of here. You know, it's just something to think about.
Well, or it's some sort of technology that we don't have,
Exactly,
which can block out any form of technology, whether it be radar, cameras, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
The case may be. And that could be for and I've heard people say this with regards to Bigfoot, because it's always like, why has no one, you know, the footage, the Patterson-Gimlin famous footage of Bigfoot is still being debated to this day, where some guy said, I think it was Bob Hieronymus, something like that, said that it was him in the suit.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Oh, well, and that's what's really cool is Pete Kelsey went and actually did LiDAR and all that stuff in that area and was a part of that investigation, I think, on one of the shows. And they talk about that. And he's like, and so it's really cool if you ever get to talk to him about that, ask him, bring that up, just in regards to the Bigfoot stuff.
Yeah, I spoke to with regards to the Bigfoot stuff. So Dr. Jeff Meldrum, who is like a world-renowned Bigfoot expert, said that he thinks the Patterson-Gimlin footage is legit because of the structure of the muscles and how it, you know, how everything just connects. And yeah,
Well,
yeah.
yeah, one of the things that I heard was about that Pete told me when when he was really looking at it, and they really did like this forensic dive onto the video, I guess, is he's like, when you look at it, and I never really realized it, but he had a copy of it or something, and we went back and watched it. He's like, it's a female.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's like, that's, females and males, we do have different anatomy, we move differently, things like that. And that was just really interesting. He's like, yeah, it's a female. Because like you always get stories of how tall they are and all that stuff. And it's like, well, if it's a primate, say, if look at all the primates. The males are always bigger than females. On your general, even your biggest female, there's always going to be a male that's way bigger. Like look through human history. And so it's just some of these different things that you have to take into account too, I think.
It is, and I think that's why it's, the history of stuff, which is pretty fascinating, like the petroglyphs and things like that, is because back then, if people saw this, if people had these sightings that they have today, and there was no internet, there was no way of photoshopping anything, and that is essentially what the guys had, what the people had, hundreds of years ago or thousands of years ago. And this is where the petroglyphs and all the, the stuff of star children and all these drawings, cave drawings and stuff like that is very interesting, because there was a lot less bullshit to filter through.
It comes back to what you were talking about, or what we were talking about earlier, where people like are disconnected and stuff. And it's like, one of the biggest things I think that cause us to be disconnected are, again, our electronics, and people are in big cities all the time. They're not out in nature. They're not, like, what's the retrospection that they have, or how are they able to really connect? And and look at all the mental health stuff going on right now, like all these I know we won't go deep dive into that right now, but it's like, really look at that. You think that was an issue like that outside of, I would say, like, historically, maybe in like big cities, when people spent their entire lives in like a massive city and they were never out.
Yeah, the whole thing with mental health is, I mean, look, it's definitely another debate for another time. Obviously, mental health is a real thing, but I do think that the term mental health gets taken advantage of when times get a little bit tough, so to speak. With
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I could show you some stuff that from like my law enforcement trainings that I have to take a year.
Yeah.
That I've literally seen this change, and what they're trying to say now from just a couple of years ago, and it doesn't sit very well with me when you really think about what's happening. And I was like, some of it, I'm like, it's not right, because I think it takes away from, again, like the people who are really struggling with actual mental health stuff.
Yeah.
And the things that now they're trying to connect it to, and things like that. And I'm like, no, it's lessening it. You're not doing the people favors. You're not,
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things. And that's where I think, like, coming back to like the UFO stuff is, Eric was asked a question by some social media guys a couple of years ago, like, how can we really help you? And he's like, reboot the narrative and elevate the discourse. Again, with this whole topic, if you will, whatever you want to call it, the UFO realm, the poltergeist realm, whatever, remote viewing, or any of these things, we do have to have those trusted sources. Like, you got to be able to find those people that you feel like they are being honest about it, and are they trying? Ask the question: do they have an ulterior motive when it comes about the stuff? And or is it, yeah, and that's for everybody to decide for themselves, kind of thing, and that's where I again, like our team, I think that's why we take it very serious about like what we are trying to present.
Mm.
And we try to be very clear about like, hey, okay, this is the data we have, and this is what we've seen with that.
Mm.
But but then, and then we make it very clear, okay, this is the conjecture part. This is like the what if, this is what we think, or this is what, we can't help but go to this kind of thing.
Mm.
But do we have the data that really says that? Not quite yet.
Yeah.
And that's what I think I think as long as we try to stay along those lines, I think for us that's the best thing we can do. And again, why I try to mostly stay on topic of the ranch and my knowledge base within the mesa and the areas I've gone to and the things that I've researched into and things like that. So
It's an interesting topic. It will forever be an interesting topic. Looking forward to season 5. And once season 5 is underway, then we'll definitely do another podcast to discuss season 5.
oh yeah, oh yeah, dude, it's gonna be crazy. I'm really excited. It's yeah, it's like how do we keep getting this stuff? I don't know. But it's really cool. I think at the end of the day, when you look over the last 5 years and you look at the evolution of the stuff that's come out and the evolution of how we're trying to do things, and it's an evolving process at the end of the day, and we're just there's so much stuff, and I know a couple of us, like I was like, I think it's about time that I get some of this on paper and um, get like a book out. And I know Tom he's been working on something too. And just because it's like for us, well, for me, I'm like, I need to get something out like that because one, it's kind of like a journal for me. I get it out, I write it down, and it's still fresh enough in my mind that, and I got enough photos and I got enough and talked with enough people and stuff that it's the same story. And I figure it's best to do it now than in 20 years when I'm sitting there going, okay, really, how,
Mm.
so it's still very fresh and then obviously the television show I think helps with that. Like I have to go back and watch some of the previous episodes and stuff on my and there's things I'm like, oh, okay, I completely forgot about that.
Yeah.
And but like the big stuff, like and then I think it's only fair to people, um again, when you put yourself into the shoes of if you've ever experienced anything and you're trying to wrap your head around it, or it takes time if you ever get the validation, from somebody else seeing the same thing, or you've seen it again, um, I think it's an important part of this is the stuff that we've all seen as a team.
Mm.
And then and so I feel like it's only fair for people to like see this evolution, and then it's like, and then I think a really cool part of that again is uh, um, Eric has brought stuff or shown me things, and it's and he's going, because you told me this 5 years ago, I thought about this, and it reminded me of this piece of information, and he's shown me things, and or other things happen during filming that I'm like, that right there,
Mm.
So and some of that has happened, and you'll see that in season 5, and so I got really excited about some stuff because it was again some of the validation
Yeah.
side of it, and again it took years. So I don't think this is again something that's gonna be quick. It's not gonna be something that's fast. If at least for me, it's a process.
Well, I mean, it's been going on as well. Again, like you said, it's been going on for a while, and what gets put out on the show is compressed.
Yeah. Well, and then yeah, this stuff's been kind of going back to like the history stuff. Like
Yeah.
how far back are some of these cave paintings or these petroglyphs and things, or there are stories from every century through human history that have been recorded of stuff,
Mm.
and questions and the interpretations of what they think people saw, things like that, you know. And so it's like,
And similar stuff all over the world, which makes it
yeah,
even more interesting. Yeah, yeah.
it baffles me when you have so much history or so much proof of things, and you still have people who absolutely want to deny it or won't accept it or whatnot, right? And it's like, and that's and it, you see it in every field, and it's like, okay, like I get it, but at the same time, it's like I don't understand how you can just put those blinders on and not want to at least have the conversation of if it's okay, like what's going on.
Caleb, thank you very much. Really appreciate it as always, and looking forward to season 5.
Yeah, and thanks for having me on, man. I always enjoy it.